Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 37 of Typewriter Talks. My name is Maureen McDowell, and I'm the founder and executive director of Keep St. Pete Lit. Typewriter Talks is an online series where we get into the brains of local Tampa Bay writers and learn about their writing process and what they're working on. And today we have Tyler Gillespie, who is a poet and nonfiction writer. Thank you, Tyler, for being here.
Yes, thank you so much for having me.
Tyler is quarantining with his grandmother in Largo. We are all doing our best right now. And last I had heard you were in Orlando teaching, but now you're back here. So we're glad to have you back selfishly in Tampa Bay.
I'm glad to be here.
Tell us what you're working on right now.
So I'm working on two projects. So I am working on another book about Florida. And that one is specifically focusing on the LGBTQ community in Florida, which I'm a member of. And I'm looking specifically at kind of a historical approach to that book.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm also working on another book right now as part of my dissertation, like academic scholarship kind of thing, about writing pedagogy for first year writing.
Cool.
Mm-hmm.
So you're working on your PhD?
I am.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
How very smart of you with your smart hat.
Right.
I think in another world, I would go down that track every fall. I'm like, I'm gonna go to school. And then I was like, are you insane? Like, where are you gonna fit this in with your own writing and Keep St. Pete and your social life and your kid?
Right. I mean, and that's the thing, like I don't have half of those things, right? So I have a lot, but I don't have a kid, which I feel like allows me to do some schooling right now.
Yeah, I acquired her, so she's my niece, and we took her in at 3 months. So
Oh wow.
yeah, I get it. She's like a Cabbage Patch doll, I say, fully formed. Here you go.
That's amazing. I hope to one day acquire a kid myself.
Yeah, especially as a woman, like some women want to expand. This is such a tangent. Some women want to expand. I never wanted to expand and incubate a child. So thankfully my sister needed help. So she was handed to us at 3 months, and it's like, as I say, a Cabbage Patch doll.
I love that.
Already starting to sleep through the night. Like it was like, I can do this. So now she's 14 and she's still just as lovely. So tell us a little bit about your writing process.
So it's such an interesting question, because I talk with that about my students all the time. Like, so what is my writing process? I think that now, since I think I've always been either working or in school. So I've always had to find pockets of time to write. And so that's how I am now, because I'm teaching full time and then I'm taking classes. I'm getting ready for my book to come out in April. I'm also, quarantining and all of that. So I'm trying to find pockets of time to do that. And so I think like the writing process always for me starts with something that I have a question about, something that I'm kind of obsessed with the thing, because I found that, my writing, I kind of do some research for it. So if I'm not really obsessed with it, then I'm not going to want to do research.
Yeah.
Right. Because the book, that I have coming out took about 5-6 years process.
Mm-hmm.
Like we were talking about before we started recording, it takes a long time to write a book. And so that's where it starts. And usually that starts with just, can start with something that I've read in a book, something that I've overheard, something that just is keeping me up at night, something that I think about in the shower. So that's where it really starts. And I think I'm thinking about the two projects that I'm working on now. They're both started out of a kind of like I want like a little bit of a friction maybe about like things that need to be explored a little bit more, or haven't been explored enough in my opinion. So that's where it kind of starts. And I think that, the process is different if I'm writing a poem
Yeah.
compared to if I'm writing an essay. They're similar, but they're kind of different processes. So if I'm writing like a nonfiction piece, it really has to do, I do a lot of research and thinking, talking to people
Mhm.
before I really try to sit down and write too much, try to do all that research first. Um, and then, it's it's not a linear process
No.
whatsoever.
No.
A very discursive process, but um, so it's trying to be organized too, which I think is something that I picked up more recently, is like trying to be as organized with that mess as possible, like putting things in folders with dates on it, just so I can circle back to it.
Mhm.
Um, and then trying to get something on paper, you know, circulating drafts to readers, sleeping on that feedback because I need to process it. I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
literally sleeping, taking a nap, sleeping for a
Yeah.
few days.
Yeah. I highly recommend naps. Like everyone should take naps. Like I will go to bed with a thought and I'll work it out in my nap and
Yes,
and then go, oh, that's the answer. Yeah.
right. Because even when we're not writing, like physically doing it, I mean, our brains are processing it, right? So
Yep.
even if we're
We're always
sleeping,
writing. I think if we are writers, we're always writing. I'm writing when I'm swimming laps. I'm always writing.
yes, yes, right. So, and I think too, just with the feedback, which is like a very far along part of the process, but it's just something that I've been thinking about as my students get ready to peer review their work, their drafts, thinking about how to like process feedback, and sleep is important to that process for me because it can be, an overwhelming experience, or you don't always hear what you want to hear.
Well,
That
that's
it's
why it's important to have safe people that are giving you feedback, but they also challenge you. Like they want you to be your best self as a writer, but they don't want to destroy your sense of self.
exactly.
Because we are very vulnerable, sensitive, well, not across the board, but pretty much if you're a creative, you're pretty wide open. You got to be careful with your creative psychic space and who you let in
Yes, exactly.
until you let it go into the world. And then you got no say on what goes on after that. But
Right, and that's why I'm so appreciative of the critical not, the constructively critical
Mhm.
feedback that I get along the way. But it can be like, when we're circulating a draft to people, we think that it's in a place where it's ready, and then sometimes the feedback that we get can kind of make us, or at least make me think, okay, it wasn't ready necessarily, but this is a step to get it to where it needs to be.
Mhm.
Um, and that's where I say again, sleep is helpful to that. Instead of being like, I need to throw this out.
Cry yourself to sleep. I had my downstairs neighbor, she teaches with us, but she also edited my poetry book. And I let it sit there for like 2 months after she gave me the edits back. I just couldn't even go there. And then when I was finally ready to just do it, I was like, these are really good, really great feedback there. I had such a fear around it, but if you have that special person, and now like I'll have a poem and I'll send it to her. I'm like, is this the right tense? Do I need to change this? And it's just those little things. And it's so wonderful when you find somebody that can do that for you. And it used to be editors did that, like
Mhm.
Maxwell Perkins would did that for Hemingway, and F. Scott Fitzgerald. Like they would see a young writer and then they would help them grow into who they were supposed to be. And that's just now in this like fast track world of publishing, it's like a lot of writers don't get a chance to develop, which is where small presses come in. Thank goodness for them.
Mhm.
Yeah. um how does your nonfiction bleed over into your poetry? Because often you might be one of the first people that I've talked to that's a poet and does nonfiction. Mostly it's poetry and fiction,
Mhm.
or just straight poetry, or just straight fiction. Does it bleed over, or is that like actually you're using completely two different sides of your brain?
I think it definitely bleeds over. So, like when I started writing the book of essays, I started as essays, and then it kind of switched to poems because I think that for me, the poetry has a little bit more space to be associative, be a little bit more meditation in there, a little bit more asking questions that don't have answers necessarily. So when I started to write the essays, not necessarily that essays and nonfiction can't be associative and have that space, but it's like, what does the audience kind of expect?
Yeah.
And I think a lot of readers, and me as a reader, kind of, we like narrative arc. We want it to go from one place to another. And so for me, when I was writing the essays, and originally I realized kind of I didn't have any answers, or I didn't have answers that felt like I wanted, that were, fully where I wanted them to be. So then I turned to the poetry to kind of work through that. And not saying like, oh, either form has to do those things. It's just the way like I approach the writing. And so, yeah, because I had a book of poetry called Florida Man Poems, and that was all about Florida and thinking about like the environment and asking questions and like, and so some of those themes, specifically alligators, those are in the essays too, of course, a lot of nature. So they're definitely, I think, in conversation with each other. And I think just as a prose writer, I find poets to be such good nonfiction writers too, because, well, I don't know necessarily because, but the attention to language,
Yeah.
the image, the associative quality that a lot of poets, the freedom, right? And I think that it makes really, a lot of poets are really good nonfiction writers, and vice versa.
Yeah. Yeah. I would agree with you. I would definitely agree with you. It's funny when we get younger poets in, and or younger writers in, and they're so up in there, like it's all these esoteric thoughts, and I'm like, okay, give us some grounding, give us some like meat and potatoes in it. And that's where the nonfiction element comes in, like just add that show don't tell, and ground us in a space, especially when you're writing about Florida, because it is so. I was kayaking 2 weekends ago, and I'm writing a book about my family growing up here, and they're fishermen and stuff, and mangroves have just haunted me. And so I love that I've got a kayak now, so I could go by the mangroves and we're listening to them, and they're like Rice Krispies, like snap, crackling, and pop. But you could never get that feeling if you were not in a kayak or a paddleboard, because you wouldn't hear it over the motor of a boat. And it was just like, this is so fascinating. Like, or even, because it was behind Shell Key. So it wasn't like something where you're going to have waves slapping up against it, which would distract. It was just, an estuary almost, but it was like, they're like musical instruments with the snap, crackle, and pop. And
I love that.
yeah. And then like going in the mangrove tunnels, and I'm like, this is like being in a mangrove womb. And I was like, I loved kayaking because I could just take notes. Like I was in the field for poetry, and Florida is just so rich for that. So rich for all the different things that we could come up with. Craig Pittman like never comes up with, he's got so many stories. Just we'll go to like civil court.
I mean, right.
Just hear like,
right,
yeah, like this is like a never ending plethora of stories, this state. I would never want to live anywhere else. So
what I think is fascinating about the mangroves just being like a nonfiction writer and a poet is there's so much metaphor in a mangrove too, right? Like the ancientness of these trees, the fish that live in, like there's just a metaphor there that I think could be extended over an essay if that was someone's inclination. And the poets, I think, are often really attuned to like the metaphorical potential of different things.
That's where I live.
Right. Not saying that prose writers aren't, but when you're writing a poem, you only have so much space, so it like makes you focus on
you were talking about wanting to be more organized and disciplined, and I was thinking like my whole life is almost like a poem. Like I'm just like, well, what do I do next, and how do I add this line? And it's just, I'm always in this, like, I actually live a very disciplined life so I can space out.
Yes.
Like I mean, like Buddhist, when you're at a Buddhist retreat, you have like a rhythm to your whole day. So you can just be in meditation all the time. So I think poetry helps us. I love that you use that term meditation. And it is like reminding us of why we are here, and which is what art does too.
Mhm.
Especially in times of crisis. We need to be reminded of our humanity. What would be the advice you would give your younger writer self?
To keep everything that you've written, because now when I go back and like I'm, wanting to write about something from childhood or when I used to write, especially there's this poem that keeps coming to me that I wrote about making friends with the monster under my bed, which is like totally like
Mm,
whatever, but I just wish I could have that piece
mhm.
because back when I in the day and even now, why I'm trying to be, foreground being organized is I would write just to write, and then once I got the idea out or the poem out or the story, I wouldn't mind if it went in the garbage or like I wouldn't keep
Oh,
track of it. Do you
yeah.
know what I mean? It was just the act of writing.
Mhm.
So, I mean, I do have some stuff that I can go back and reference, but there's some stuff that I really wish that I would be able to access, like you know, some of the first poems or stories that I had written. So that's what immediately pops into my head. Um, but I think on probably a more like maybe practical writing advice, something that I kind of have learned, in the past, like probably 5 or 6 years ago, I made it a practice to be supportive of people rather than jealous of writers. So if
Wow.
there's a writer that gets something or publication, you know, instead of feeling like we're in a competition or like, oh, they got something that I didn't, to
Yeah.
support them.
Yeah.
And so I started that practice, 5, 6 years ago. And I think that if I would have done that even when I was younger, it could have helped me more in community and just feel happier.
That's really good advice. I remember when I was first out as a poet locally, there wasn't a whole lot that I knew of. Locally, I wasn't really in the academic world, and there was a woman who showed up, a younger woman, and she just like blew everyone out of the water. And at first, my first intuition was like, I'm going to be like jealousy. And then it was like, wait a minute, no, I want to know this person. I want to be friends with her. And I completely switched it. And this person has gone on to teach with us. She's still partnering with us. She's one of my dear friends. She's been on our board, and so it's like, if you don't like embrace that, you don't move into that space. Yeah, that's a hard one. That's a hard one. But we all have different paths, like I don't necessarily feel I have a path that she's would take. I know it. I couldn't have the path she's taken. So wherever her writing goes is not the path my writing is going to go. I mean, I see myself being 90 and then finally recognized. And then so in my mind, maybe not at 90, I won't care anymore. But I look at it as I could just be that poet that's writing for myself, and I don't have to deal with the noise, which is way more appealing to me than playing the game. But it depends on the person. That's really
Right.
good advice. I like that. So tell us what you're reading right now, and or some of your favorite authors or poets.
So I just finished, actually yesterday, finished Gail Massey's new book,
Mm.
Rising and Other Stories. It's her short story collection that comes out on April 13th.
We interviewed her for Typewriter Talks, so there's an interview for her.
Yes, she's great.
Yeah.
Because our books, we're doing an event together because our books are coming out on the same day. So
Cool.
yes. So I just finished that book. And I also just finished a couple days ago this book called Should Robots Replace Teachers? So that's where my mind is at.
Oh,
Like,
well, we're kind of now with Zoom and yeah.
okay, so those are the two books that I literally like just finished this week. And the one was because I'm, uh, Gail is a Florida author. The other is because it's part of like one of my classes.
Mhm.
But some of my favorite poets, someone who really changed my idea of poetry is this poet named C.D. Wright.
Mm, yeah.
She wrote this book called One Big Self. She kind of uses some nonfiction techniques,
Mhm.
some, like, I wouldn't say journalistic, but like she has different methods. It's like more hybrid work, I guess some people might say. And so that really helped me understand my own voice and like, or start to understand it. And that started from an assignment from another poet who I love. Her name is Carolyn Hembry, and she was a teacher of mine in graduate school. And she had this really amazing assignment where she asked us to read an author's, like, all the work they'd published, so
Mm,
we could see how their work changed from
yeah.
their first book to like their most recent.
Uh,
And so she recommended CD Wright, and I got to see how like her poetry expanded. And she writes a lot about, the environment and stuff like that. So those are two poets that I really, really like. I also really like D.A. Powell. Um, kind of, he's playful and he has a like formalistic element to it that I really enjoy. I don't know. There's so many authors
yeah, I know it's hard.
yeah, those are the poets that I really, that just pop into my head in this moment. Um,
We get our canned answers, especially, no, I'm kidding. I'm always like, I love Anne Mara Lindbergh's Gift from the Sea. And I just added Lawrence Ferlinghetti's if poetry as insurgent art. I can't recommend that book enough. Like, poets are the divine legislators of the world at that level.
wow.
Yeah, he founded City Light Books and helped get the Beats work out there, Lawrence Ferlinghetti. And it's just this adorable hardcover red book that I got at St. Mark's bookstore before it closed in New York City. And if you just open it and you're like in it, about the power of being a poet.
Yes.
It's a poet manifesto. So
I love manifestos. And that makes me think to another author, just since we're talking about like nonfiction and poetry, would be like Claudia Rankine, like
yeah.
Citizen. Because that, like, when we're talking about the kind of prose poetry or
Yeah.
whatever, that makes me think of, I mean, and her work is amazing and really, I think, steps in a really interesting formal place.
I see that with this book I'm working on about my family, we'll kind of have multiple, it won't, be a hybrid type of book. I'm letting it write itself. It'll tell me what it needs to be. So that's pretty interesting and exciting. And you actually gave me an inspiration because I actually have a poem about the color green in my keepsake box from when I was a teenager. And I
Yes.
think that would be perfect to include this in this family book because, of the young poet, but being drawn to nature and growing up on fishing boats and locally in the water. So thank you.
I love that.
Awesome. Where do you go for inspiration? Like, do you get writer's block? Some writers say they never get writer's block, but what do you do to get inspired?
So I think when it comes, I think on going for a walk. I mean, I'm thinking about like during this moment where I'm so limited. Usually, to where I go to would get inspired is I would go. A lot of my nonfiction includes like journalistic elements and interviews and participatory stuff. So I would go do something
Yeah.
that makes me uncomfortable or that I'm, but now that I can't do that, I think even because I also like to, overhear, eavesdrop, I think is a really good practice for inspiration. But now I think going for a walk is a good way to just be out and like let your minds wander a little bit. And I think when feel like I have writer's block, I think revising a piece or looking at a piece that I haven't looked at in a while to try to revise it
Yeah.
is always a really good practice for me because that is revising is writing, right? So if I feel like uninspired, then I cannot like revise a piece, which is what's really cool about poetry is for me, I can sit with a line for like 8 hours or I unfortunately don't have 8 hours to sit with a line now, but I can sit with it for however long I have and like adjust the word and feel like, okay, I did
Did that
some
with
revision.
I did that with
Right.
It took like 4 days to figure out how do I describe it's not bad memories, but how do I describe those memories, but not use the word bad? And it was like, I was putting all these like different words together and I finally go, that's it. But it took like 4 days.
Exactly. And
Mhm.
so just being in the middle of it, of the process, is just inspiring in general, like having a little breakthrough with figuring out the right word, or like the how I want to break a line, or how to incorporate.
It
That's
is.
inspiring.
Yeah, it is. It's like our drug. That's
Right.
it. Yeah. I get it. I get it. So what would be one more question and we'll hear some of your writing. What would be your holy grail piece of writing advice?
Um, this is a piece, well, something that helped me, especially as a nonfiction writer. And it's going to sound so basic, probably. But it was just, and this is not necessarily for everybody, but for me, it was like, because I was writing memoirs a lot. I was, and I felt like I had to have fully finished stories for memoir. And, you know, some of the stories I didn't necessarily want to talk about. I wasn't in a place. So anyway, a professor said, write about something that's not yourself.
Hmm.
And I don't know, that just opened up, which I had already been doing, like as a journalist and as a practice. But, I think that's why essays, I think, they don't have to be an art, they can be associative too. So if you're having a moment, you can go do some research. So, write about how does that connect? How do you make it interesting to an audience? And that's oftentimes, looking outward.
Yeah.
Right. So that, I don't know, that just was really, profound to me in the time. But I also think like my what really keeps me focused too is like there's a difference between writing and publishing, right? So
Yes.
I think you can control your, or you can't control your writing necessarily, but like you can frame how you feel about your writing and stuff, but like you really don't have a lot of control over the publishing aspect of it, and they're two completely different things. So I think, as for me, as long as I'm happy with the work that I'm doing, or like as close to happy as I can be, and I know that I'm doing my best, or as close to that as
Yeah.
I can
Yeah.
be, like
Yeah.
that's really a lot, like for
Mhm.
me. And I think that when I was you know probably 10 years ago, I was really chasing that byline, or that publication, or that this or that fellowship or whatever. And so I was constantly like not super satisfied with the work I was producing or whatever. And so I think now it's so much more about the writing for me. And it may or may not get published. I mean, publication to me is about so many factors: timing, political, like there's just so much stuff, and we can't control it and get wrapped up in it. And some of the best writers I know don't publish because they don't want to be part of that,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So
Or you
yeah.
can go with small presses, or you can go like I'm going with St. Petersburg Press. It's a local press. My friends are running it. I'm fine being a local poet, like
Yeah.
that to me, like this is, I will still have creative control. It'll support a local press. I'll be supporting my friends. My book will get out there. I don't have that. I mean, I know some people that are playing the game where they're submitting 400 places a year. And it's like, number one, I just don't have the time or the money because a lot of submission costs, so, but does that mean that I don't ever publish? No. Does that mean that I'm not meant to be a writer? No. It's just that's not the avenue I necessarily need to go on. And we all need to trust, I think, if we're called to do this, that there is a right street or avenue for you. You just have to figure out, well, what is it? And it might not be traditional, but I've never been traditional. So
Right. And right, that's the writing life. And I think
yeah.
too, like someone said something, I can't remember, I don't even know, but just about like, would you rather be good, or would you rather like, you know, have a platform? Or not that you can't be both, but
Yeah.
like, you want to be good, because that's, that's good for the soul.
Yeah. I like that. Yeah.
And I mean, people can do both, and that's
Both.
super cool.
A lot
But
of
I
people
think
do both. Yeah.
a lot of people do both. But I just think like then if it, if that does happen, it's like really it's a cherry on top or whatever,
That's a good way
when
to do it.
yeah.
Yeah. Being a good writer and writing in a way that's good for the soul is the cake. And then
Yes.
the platform and the publication and all that, that's the cherry on top. I think that is a really good frame of reference, because we tend to, in this very capitalistic consumer, how many likes culture, even before that, we think it's the opposite. And then people get that and then they're not, they don't, some people feel that wasn't very satisfying. What?
Right. And that makes me think about when we were talking about supporting other people,
Mhm.
like, the market makes us feel like we're in competition with each other, but, that's not real. I mean, that's not necessarily reality. We can all eat some cake if that's like the metaphor we're using. But also like, some of the writers that I know that, have had won big books or whatever, like they really put their time and investment into the community. So then when their book was a bestseller or whatever, they had already had so much community support because they had supported other people.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. That's a beautiful way to segue into your own writing.
Oh, yes.
Very good. You gave a lot of wonderful nuggets of wisdom that we haven't gotten yet. That's why it's always so great to do these interviews, because you think that we're going to kind of hear the same things, but like this is number 37 and every writer is giving us something different because everybody's experience is different.
Mm.
And there isn't one right way to be a writer. And that's what I really want to show through interviewing. And we're all in the same area too. It's not like we're all living in all different, regions or countries or states. We're all living in Tampa Bay, but everybody, and I haven't even scratched the surface on the writers that are here, like, and everybody's given us like a different perspective, and I love it. It's just, so thank you. So let's hear your work.
Okay, awesome. Okay, so this is coming from my new book, The Thing About Florida. Ooh, there we go.
Pink. It's the color of my bike.
Yes, it is hot pink snake skin, I
Oh,
guess.
I love it. That's so Florida.
I was like, I need hot pink on this cover. Okay. Oh Lord.
When does your book come out?
It comes out April 13th.
Okay. Oh, so exciting.
2021, and it's available for pre-order now.
Wonderful.
Oh, okay. I thought I was gonna read one thing, but now I'm okay. Sorry, I should have been more prepared.
It's okay. I do that. Like the whole tone might have shifted, and you're like, I have to read something different, or.
Okay. I don't know. Okay, I'm just gonna read this piece.
Okay.
Okay, so this is from the beginning of an essay called Young and Beautiful Forever. The first boy I ever crushed on had the best tan in school and could perform a spot-on impersonation of Jim Carrey. I had to pine for my Ace Ventura pet detective from afar because my Southern Baptist school considered homosexuality a sin. It was an expulsion-worthy offense. The high school me feared expulsion for homo feelings, but luckily I had Tampa. A bridge separated the city from God and the school's administration. My best friend Jessica and I would drive to the city's gay bars more often than I cared to admit. We'd get drunk on our own kind of holy water as I began to figure out how this whole gay thing worked. I could do this as a young teenager in bars because I had found an ID of a 25-year-old white guy with a crew cut. I'm not saying all white guys look the same, but the idea worked for me all but one of the many, many times I flashed it. I struggled with my outlawed sexuality during the day, but in gay bars, I danced away the fiery damnation. In those bars, I got a different education. I heard a new language, code, and slang. I started to learn the history of men who had met in secret bookstores and clandestine spaces. Those generations had fought for people like me. I learned these things from older guys. They'd usually arrive at the club early like me, them to get home at a decent hour, and me to get in for free. I'd sit at the bar next to them and they'd tell me a story. I've always liked good storytellers, and those seasoned queens were some of the best. It was at one of these bars that I first dressed in full drag for Halloween when I was 17 or 18. I took inspiration from rock groupies. I put on a Joan Jett wig, AC/DC bandana, black lipstick, and drew skulls on my arm. I wore a tank top as a mini dress and let a lavender bra hang out of it because I'm classy. Halloween proved my one big foray into drag until I moved back in with my grandmother. My hometown haircut place only took appointments for women, even though they also cut men's hair. My favorite stylist, Randy, called it an old barbershop rule. He gave me a code name to use for appointments. Call in and say you're booking a haircut for Brigitte, he said. That way I'll know it's you when I see the schedule. The seasoned queen Randy cut my hair for years. We struck up a friendship through discussions of American Horror Story and the less popular Ryan Murphy show, Scream Queens. Mom said I'd been so traumatized as a kid that I'd grow up to be either a compassionate person or a serial killer, said the 52-year-old. Instead of turning into a serial killer, I just like to watch them on TV. Randy Phoenix, his real legal last name, is a seventh generation Floridian. His grandparents owned a dairy farm that got turned into a cemetery in St. Pete. He never knew anything other than Florida, and his mom, like mine, had took him to the beach because it was free. His mother also took him to St. Pete's Web City, nicknamed the world's most unusual drugstore. He loved going to this mall before malls because he could walk through its mermaid grotto. The mermaids were made of plaster, but to him, they were beautiful. I've known since I was a little kid, he said, that I like mermaids and shiny sequins. At 5 years old, he moved with his family from St. Pete to nearby Pinellas Park. The areas, while adjacent, were worlds away in terms of diversity at the time. Pinellas Park residents were more country to him. Everyone seemed to own a truck with a Confederate flag in the back of it. People bullied Randy for being effeminate. A boy gave him a black eye during a middle school book fair, then continued to assault him until senior year. Randy faced daily harassment in the school. Even his teachers teased him. His math teacher made fun of his bright socks in front of the whole class. A few of the teachers at my Southern Baptist high school had teased me too. An English teacher nicknamed me Skittles, as in taste the rainbow. And a math teacher told me I sounded gay. Randy experienced violence that I never did. He ran for his life almost every day. His bus driver often let him off early so he could start running before the other kids had a chance to chase him down. If they had social media back then, the online bullying may have pushed him over the edge. I don't think I would have survived it, he said. I'm not sure I'd be here right now because it was that bad for me at times. In senior year, he stood up to the boy who had assaulted him since the middle school book fair. One day, the boy came up to him in the locker room and said, hey, F word, come suck my D. Randy responded with, I'm going to beat your ass in the bus circle so everybody can see an F word beat you up. The two met outside and Randy went into a rage. He blacked out and broke the bully's jaw. The boy's family took Randy to court. He said the judge told them they needed to teach their kids some manners. He dismissed the case. The school suspended Randy after the fight. He didn't feel safe enough to return. His mother went into action mode. She had supported him since they'd walked together through the mermaid grotto and later when he walked in her heels. She wouldn't allow this experience to define her son. She told him, you're not going back to that school anyway. I've got you enrolled in something better, a beauty school. This beauty school intervention forever changed Randy's life. It also changed his makeup routine. He met his first drag queen through beauty school friends. He had never met a queen, but he fell in love with the illusion. Necessity may be the mother of invention, but for Randy, the mother of invention was drag. his ticket into gay bars. He'd been sneaking into Tampa gay bars until a club staff member discovered he was underage. The next time he went there, a raspy-voiced lesbian bouncer named Fruity wouldn't let him in the bar. He didn't know what to do, but his friend had a fabulous idea. He told Randy to get up and drag and go back over there. Randy threw on a bleach blonde wig, some makeup, and a Cyndi Lauper-inspired outfit. He adjusted his skirt and approached Fruity, the guardian of all things gay. She met him with a universal gay greeting of, "Hey girl," and let him into the promised land. The staff didn't recognize Randy, and he began to perform in the bar as his eventual drag persona, Portia. Portia soon made as much money doing drag as Randy did doing hair. Randy, who preferred male pronouns when not in drag, worked as Portia all over Florida and participated in drag pageants. She was known as the funny fat girl and emceed shows. Portia found out she loved the spotlight and being on a microphone. Randy described those nights as a mess, but he found a community among all the lipstick and lashes. He also found himself. "When I was in drag, I was empowered," he said. "I never felt uncomfortable, like I couldn't go to the Circle K and drag because I was gonna make them like it no matter what." Drag soon became a family affair. Both his mom and dad attended Portia's shows. They even let his friends get ready in their home. They'd all sit around the family table to put on their faces. The friends would cut up and carry on for hours while Randy's dad sat back in his recliner, laughing along with them. These family nights of the 80s halted during the latter part of the decade. AIDS did not miss the Florida area at all, said Randy. "I don't think people grasped the magnitude of what was going on because they didn't see what they were seeing in the big cities." His 3 best friends died from the disease. He went to a succession of at least 7 funerals. "As a late 80s baby, I grew up in the wake of the AIDS outbreak. I feared I could catch the disease from a finger prick at a gas pump. I also thought I could become gay from sitting in the same place as a gay man. In my adult years, I began to write about men affected by the AIDS crisis. I couldn't imagine the trauma they experienced, the sheer number of people who died around them. I interviewed queer men who lost partners to the disease. One man told me he stopped keeping the death toll of his friends after 30 of them died from AIDS. It was a freaky time," said Randy. "You just never stop thinking about it. It never goes away. The AIDS crisis changed nightlife and the LGBTQ community forever." Randy continued to perform in drag throughout this scary time. He most likely would still be performing if he hadn't hurt himself. He fell into a drained swimming pool and damaged his back. He could no longer stand in heels, so he hung them up for good. He has since felt like a big part of him went missing. He thrived on the applause and had found a family with the performers. "Now that I am growing old in Florida," he said, "I don't know who is going to care that I'm gone. The older gay people I know have no one to look after them or to help take care of them. They have to make plans for themselves, which I'm not very good at." Randy's injury led him and his partner of 21 years to my hometown. He called the area one of the most conservative places in the county. "But believe it or not," he said, "a lot of gay people come in the shop." The area was miles better than the days when he ran for his life after school. "There's still a ton of stupidity, but it's more open than when we were kids," he said. "No matter where you go, you're going to see a gay person. People have really started to come around to it." So that's the first section. Thank you.
I grew up going to tracks.
Yes, 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 yes.
I did DNA or the Orpheum or tracks. Yeah.
Yes.
I was just thinking about that last night. That was my introduction to the gay world. I had one friend in school, Jeffrey, and but he got so bullied. Got so bullied, and he didn't try to pass, and but yeah, tracks, gosh, that was 93, 92, 93, 94, 95, 90, however long.
Yes.
Did it become the Castle? Did it become the Castle? No, the Castle's another one, but that's the goth. That's my goth side.
Right. Many sides.
I have my alternative side, my goth side, my punk rock side, and then the techno of tracks.
I love that.
Yeah. But they would have straight night. Sunday was straight night. But oh, that was so beautiful. What a lovely story. I love that.
And so that essay, like that is the first section of the essay. And so it's kind of like braided. And so that essay then goes from talking about Randy, and then it um, profiles activists, specifically Equality Florida activist Nadine Smith and others. And then it goes on to look at a younger drag queen who went viral. Florida Man is actually her name. She's amazing. She's amazing. Because I also write about Florida Man, so it like ties into that. And then the last section of it is looking about ways that members of the LGBTQ community are growing older, and the different resources they have or don't have. So that's kind of how like the essays in the book are. They start with one thing and kind of like, you know, meander to other facets of that topic.
Yeah, and I think that's because, you know, unless they adopted, which for a large period of time, it wasn't okay to adopt if you were gay. So do you have children? Do you have extended family? Do you have somebody who can be there for you? I was just thinking about that with my mother. I have 3 other siblings. I'm like, oh, we could each do shifts, like when it comes to that. Like I could do Monday, Wednesday, you know, but who do you have if you don't have children to take care of you and our community? So I'm really glad that you're highlighting that, because that's, you know, something that's not talked about much. So
And yeah, and it's also hard too, because even the friend community, like a lot of, you know, queer people will have like chosen family, but you know, the AIDS crisis is still impacting that, because a lot of the relationships that they had when they were younger may not have, you know, been able to survive. So, but it's also fun. Like I really, like I said in the opening, I grew up hanging around, you know, the elders or you know, whatever. So I really like, there's fun, you know, we talk
oh,
about a lot
yeah.
of fun stuff in there too. It's like,
No, I mean, you don't have to feel bad that it's like, whoa. I mean, that's life. There's the sequin flashiness, and then there's the other part. Like it's, you know, that's part of what makes us human, I think. And that's beautiful. I cannot wait to read it. Tyler, thank you so much
thank you.
for being here. And I'm glad that I got to see your face, even though it's via Zoom. And your book comes out April 14th, correct?
April 13th.
13th, and we will have a link in your bio of where people can pre-order it. And keep a lookout for the talk with Gail Massey. You guys do a book talk together. 2 great local Florida authors. And if you want to know more about Keep St. Pete Lit, you can go to keepstpetelit.org. We have online classes, poetry open mics, book clubs, all kinds of different events going on. So you know, we hope to be the one-stop literary shop for the community. And stay tuned for next Typewriter Talks episode 38. And thank you again, Tyler, for being you.
Thank you so
And
much.
thank you everyone for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.